Hey kids, do you ever feel like life has passed you by? Does the daily grind leave you feeling trapped in your own life like an animal in a cage? Well, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy some fun facts about livestock while you're at it. Today, I'll be giving a tour of the life, death, and processing of the American beef cattle. Disclaimer, this video is only a basic summary of some common industry practices. No two farms are alike, some are nicer, some are worse. I'm not a shill, please don't get mad at me. Now, in the beginning, there was nothing. And then God said, "Let there be light!" And it was good.
Henceforth you shall be called Craig.
At birth, the calf weighs somewhere between 60 and 100 pounds. The males are typically castrated within the first couple of weeks, usually without anesthetic. The main point of this is to keep the steers mellow later in life, but it also stops their male hormones from giving the meat an off taste that the American palate isn't really accustomed to. Anyway, things started off pretty good for Craig. Drinking milk, hanging out, the life. After a while he figures out you can eat the floor, that's cool. But then after about 10 months, he gets loaded into the cattle cars. If you're a history buff like me, you know that's not a good sign. Little does Craig know, he's been auctioned off to a feedlot 1,000 miles away. Here the cattle are packed together like sardines, if sardines were 500-pound terrestrial mammals. The menu consists of random roughage and energy-dense feed like corn so they can pack on the pounds more quickly. Overall, this environment puts a good deal of stress on the beast, which can end up taking a toll on his health. But it's nothing a little visit from the antibiotics fairy can't fix. Once fully grown, Craig gets taken to the packing plant. This is where the magic happens, and by magic we mean mechanically automated goring into commodities. This is where things get messy, so try to forget that we gave this random animal a name a minute ago. In order to keep things as humane as possible, a worker will first use this device, referred to as a stunner. Here's a demonstration. This renders the beast instantly unconscious, or worse, but potato at this point. Its ankle is then attached to a conveyor rail, which will gently guide the animal along the rest of its journey. First, the cow gets to talk to this man. He's called the sticker. Can you guess what he does? If you said that he gouges out throats for a living, you'd be correct. Over the course of about a minute, the flow goes from torrential downpour to incontinent poodle, by which point our beloved bovine can continue on his way. At the next station, the cow is subjected to high voltage electrical stimulation. Hopefully the nervous system is all out of steam by this point, but if not, the boys on the killing floor will have a great story to tell their wives. Haha, just kidding. The FDA estimates that 93% of meat worker marriages are in shambles. Who knew that 11 hours of pure slaughter every day could desensitize a man? Anyway, electrical stimulation basically works to speed up the onset of rigor mortis. Getting this process out of the way means the meat won't toughen up once it reaches the freezer. Next, the carcass undergoes a thorough power washing. Like the noble mortician, this hose works to make a lifetime of filth disappear. Unfortunately, though beauty is only skin deep, manure runs to the core, so the cow must be disemboweled to prevent contamination later on. And we might as well get rid of all these other gross bits while we're at it. Then the feds stick their nose in things to make sure everything is as it should be. Yup, it's a cow. Finally, we send it down the line, evacuate the spine, bifurcate the hind, reticulate the spline, and power wash it again just for good measure. This whole process from bashing to slashing to splashing takes a mere 15 minutes to complete. That means it takes the same amount of time to process 3 half-ton mammals and 1 scheduled license renewal. Try puzzling that one out. After hanging out in the cooler for a couple days, the beef is broken down into its many cuts: chuck, loin, sirloin, what have you. This is the good stuff. That'll get shipped off as is to barbecues, bar mitzvahs, and bargain bins all across the country. Then you got all these misfit bits hanging out wherever else. Still technically flesh, so we have machines pluck it off, pulp it, and use it to make hamburgers, hot dogs, and the like. Then all the garbage even Americans can't stomach is sent off to the rendering plant to be made into whatever else. So there you have it. I don't really have an outro, except kinda gross, right? Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching. Hey kids, time to talk about more cases of stiff lifting from the days of yore. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go check it out. Or don't. I'm a YouTuber, not a cop, unfortunately. This first tale doesn't feature an entire dead body, but I still found it interesting enough to talk about. So one day in 2012, a priest was riding a train out of Italy when his bag got stolen by a trio of thieves. Inside the bag was whatever normal personal possessions the guy happened to own, as well as a small vial containing the blood of none other than Pope John Paul II. So this begs the question, why did the priest have Pope blood in his bag? Well, an important way that the Catholic Church honors saints and other venerated venerated individuals is the keeping of relics. These relics are ranked in terms of how close they were to the person at hand. You got something that's tangentially related to a saint in any way, that's a third-class relic. If it's a personal possession of a saint, it's second class. And as for first-class relics, those typically consist of literal body parts and or fluids of a holy figure. Now for you youngsters out there, in 1981, the Pope got shot 4 times by some fascist having a bad day. People are like, holy shit, it's a popicide! Is that even a word? No, I'm okay. Oh. Say, who left all this first-class relic lying around? So to this day, there remain 3 objects containing the fine-aged poppy juice spilled that fateful afternoon. The vial was found a few hours later by police among the reeds and grass near the station, which basically means the thieves took one look at it and were like, blood? I already make this myself. Lame. And tossed it out without a second thought. Here's the thing though, that's not the only instance of old JP2 getting blood napped. In 2014, a similar relic was yoinked from the church of San Pietro della Ienca in Italy alongside a crucifix. The fact that these were the only items taken led to 2 prevailing theories. Some people thought that, since John Paul II wasn't technically a saint yet, the relic's value would go way up once the man was actually canonized, so the thieves decided to take it now and resell it later. The other theory was way more popular with the media. After all, what use does Pope blood have other than satanic rituals? This story naturally got a lot of press, and the whole world just kind of assumed that Lucifer himself was set to return any day now. Eventually, the thieves confessed, so authorities came to the rehab facility they were staying at. They returned the cross, but when questioned about the relic, they were like, wait, what? Pope blood? Satan? Do you guys need to check in here too? Eventually, it was found in a rubbish bin on the facility grounds, which means once again, it was just casually tossed out as nonsense. You ever throw out Pope blood? Because apparently, multiple people have done that on separate occasions just in the past 7 years. It doesn't end there, of course. In 2016, this happened a 3rd time when a piece of cloth with John Paul fluid on it was taken from Cologne Cathedral. I can't for the life of me find a follow-up to this story, which leads me to believe that they're just like, fuck it, Pope blood's more trouble than it's worth at this point. But if you guys can find some conclusion to where it ended up, let me know below. Now, our next story begins with a man named Karl Tanzler, a German-born radiology technologist in early 20th century Florida. He looked kind of like Sigmund Freud, except even more evil looking. On the inside, he was a pretty normal dude, other than the fact that he claimed to have visions throughout his life of some mysterious dark-haired girl. Anyway, in 1930, while working at the Marine Hospital in Key West, he met a young woman by the name of Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, called Elena for short, and he said, "Oh my god, that's the girl from the visions I've been having." Yeah, wait, what? "We were meant to meet today. We must be soulmates." What? Don't you have like a wife and 2 kids? Destiny. Hoyos was soon diagnosed with tuberculosis, which was considered fatal at the time, so naturally Karl decided to handle her treatment, going as far as convincing her family to let him visit their home every day. Except he was a radiologist, so even if there were reliable means to treat tuberculosis at the time, he definitely didn't have the credentials to do so. But whatever, this is the past we're talking about after all. That place was a shit show from start to finish. I'm not about to get on somebody's case for a little clerical error. In addition to whatever salves and tinctures and such doctors gave to people back then, Tanzler showered her with gifts of clothes and jewelry. I know he meant well, but if I was bedridden with a terminal illness, I'd just be insulted. Like, wow, thanks, can't wait to show off this little number out on the town. Anyway, eventually, Tanzler found that the time had come to reveal his true feelings. "Elena, there's something I must confess. I'm deeply in love with you." "I'm so glad you feel the same." Hoyos inevitably succumbed to the disease, leaving Tanzler heartbroken. He just wasn't ready to part ways with his pestilence-riddled sweetheart, so he asked the family's permission to commission an above-ground mausoleum for their daughter. And since this was the early 20th century, they said, "What a sweet, selfless man. I'm sure he'd never do this just so he could commit crimes against nature." Then he was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, could I have some of her hair too?" "Sure, kind stranger. Here's a bag of her hair we just had lying around for some fucking reason. Again, no red flags here." He went to visit her dwelling nearly every night for 2 years. Then finally one day he said, "You know what, kid? You're alright. Say, how's about we ditch this musty old mausoleum and go back to my place?" I'll take that as a yes. So he took her home in a little red toy wagon, which is ridiculous. It makes me picture him skipping around, whistling a merry tune. "Hey neighbor!" Now here's a riddle for all you intellectuals out there. What do a dead body and a used PT Cruiser have in common? Sure, they both taste terrible, and you never want to be seen in public with one. Most importantly though, they're a depreciating asset. But hey, that didn't stop old gnarly Carly from sprucing her up any way he could. Wiring her bones back together with coat hangers, replacing her skin with wax and silk, making a wig out of that bag of hair from earlier, failure, and soaking the body in massive amounts of perfume and disinfectants, for obvious reasons. He claimed to have been instructed to do all this by Elena's spirit, which he would apparently talk to frequently. He also did, you know, that thing eccentric loners do with dead ladies in their house, but we won't talk about that. This went on for 7 years, 7 hot and humid Florida years, until 1940 when Elena's sister saw him dancing with some lady through the curtains. She's like, "Aw, how cute. I'm glad that old bag of lentils has finally found love." Walks in, comes to find out it's her fucking dead sister. So the cops come, but there isn't any conclusive evidence of any flirting and philandering with the body, so the only crime Carl could have been charged with was grave robbing. Except the statute of limitations was already up by the time he was found out, so they just took the body, tipped their hats, and went on their merry way. Tanzler still missed Elena dearly, but since he couldn't have her cadaver, he crafted a crude homemade effigy of the lady, which he lived with for the rest of his life. Here's the part that really gets me though. He apparently went back to live with his estranged wife once the jig was up. Just like, "Hey babe, I know we haven't talked since the whole corpse thing, but I've been having trouble making rent. Do you think I could come crash for a while?" "Sure, come right in. I'll take your coats. Would you and the demented life-size replica of your long-dead lover that you left me for like a cup of tea?" "I'd like one. None for her though. It goes right through her." Of course, I'm making all this out to be a horrifying thing for the goofs and gaffs of it, but at the time, a lot of people read the news stories about Tanzler, and many actually sympathized with the man. They saw him as the distraught, hapless romantic that he saw himself as. You know why they had that compassion? Because they listened. Say, what would the world look like if we all listened more? Sponsor time! Listening to audiobooks inspires us, motivates us, even brings us closer, and there's no better place to listen than Audible. But what should you listen to, you ask? After all, there's so many options that it's almost overwhelming. Well, normally I tell you to go listen to my book, but unfortunately I've never written a book, so instead, how about the Necronomicon? That's right. The Necronomicon is on Audible. Now you too can learn exactly how to put that Pope blood in the backseat to use on your way to work. Tie in all seriousness, a novel really worth checking out is Edwin Abbott's Flatland, a book about life in an entirely two-dimensional universe, and it is a trip, trust me. You can get your first audiobook free along with 2 selected Audible original titles and exclusive fitness programs when you start your 30-day trial. Just visit audible.com/salmonella or text salmonella to 500 to get started. Again, go to audible.com/SAMONELLA or text SAMONELLA to try Audible for free. Link in the description. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching. Thanks to Dashlane for sponsoring this video. Hey kids, whether you're a precocious young lad down by the swimming hole or a grizzled crime scene investigator, everybody's got some interest in dead bodies. Yes, from Weekend at Bernie's to Weekend at Bernie's 2 to Weekend at Bernie's 3 Revelations, stories about wayward corpses have certainly carved their niche in today's media. So, I thought I'd spin a few yarns about some real-life people who were kept out far past their expiration date. Our first tale follows one Elmer McCurdy. He was an outlaw during the twilight days of the Wild West. Thanks to his former life as a miner, McCurdy acted as the demolitions expert to his little posse, using nitroglycerin basically anytime he had the faintest excuse to do so. Except, he was kind of a moron, so it didn't usually go quite as planned. Gotta say, after peanut butter and chocolate, my favorite combination of two things is probably gross incompetence and high explosives. Example, in March of 1911, McCurdy's band of rabble-rousers found out that $4,000 were in a safe in an approaching train. They managed to stop the entire locomotive, I don't even know how you do that, break in, hold everyone on board hostage, and locate the safe. McCurdy steps up to plate, right? Gotta blast the thing open, except I guess the excitement kinda got to him, because he ended up using like way too much nitroglycerin, like inordinate amounts. Ended up completely destroying the safe and its contents, and what few silver coins they made out with were literally melted to the frame of the safe and had to be peeled off. Anyway, he died in a shootout with police later that year, and the undertaker at the funeral home he was sent to couldn't find any next of kin on account of McCurdy being a rambling low-life varmint. varmint, so he just embalmed the hell out of him and said, "Hey boys and girls, want to see a dead criminal? Only one shiny nickel." And since LiveLeak wasn't around at the time, there weren't many places a kid could go to stare at a corpse for a while if he or she so desired. So it actually became a pretty popular attraction. Visitors would pay their dues by physically slipping the coin into the man's mouth, and the creepy ass undertaker would come fish him out later, probably with bare hands all slowly and sensual-like. A few years passed when a couple of guys showed up claiming to be McCurdy's brothers with a note from the local sheriff to back it up. They told the undertaker they had permission to go bury McCurdy, so he reluctantly relinquished the body to the men. Except, these guys weren't his brothers. They were just a couple of crusty freaking carnies. They shipped the body off to Kansas to become an attraction in the traveling show. From here, McCurdy traded hands a few more times. At one point, he was exploited for this one guy's film about narcotics. It was like, yeah, this pill-popping degenerate got shot while trying to rob a pharmacy for more dope the other day. The body was super old by then, so people are like, wait, why is he all desiccated and flaky and gross? He just goes, yep, that's what happens when you do drugs, kids. Your fucking skin falls off. Stay above the influence. At some point in his journey, he ended up getting coated in wax and paint to look a little less rotty, before ending up in a warehouse in 1949. Here's the thing, he was in there alongside some actual wax figures, and after spending 19 years in storage, nobody knew he was a real corpse anymore, so he ended up getting sold in 1968 as a mannequin to one Spoonie Singh, owner of the Hollywood Wax Museum. He tried to lend the guy out a couple times during his stay, but people found him too gross or unrealistic looking for whatever purposes they had in mind. So he ended up getting sold again and used as a prop of a hanged man at the Pike Amusement Zone in their Funhouse ride, with zero knowledge that he was an actual dead criminal. It wasn't until 1976, 65 years after his death, that an episode of The $6 Million Man was being filmed at the complex, and a stagehand tried to move the prop around only to have its arm break off in his hand. He was like, ugh, lousy stiff. Wait a minute, that's curious. This mannequin's got human flesh and bones inside of it. Wait a minute. Uh-oh. The autopsy confirmed what everyone present at the time suspected. By this point, the body was so dried out and stale that it only weighed 50 pounds, which makes me think we should start a radical new fad diet where we just get people to mummify parts of their body. Like, Jenny, guess what? I just lost 30 pounds in 5 days. Wow, holy heck, how'd you do that? They call it the Egyptian cleanse. Anyway, with that, McCurdy was finally laid to rest back in his homeland of Oklahoma, and that film crew's lives were never the same again. Flashback to late 18th century.
Baloney.
There lived a physician by the name of Luigi Galvani. This guy was a big deal. He's the dude who discovered that, hey, animals got electricity in them. And his legacy still survives today in words like galvanize. One of his most famous experiments was the one where he used static electricity to make frog legs twitch on command. Around these parts, we call that the French salute. Stereotypes funny. Well, in 1803, his nephew, Giovanni Aldini, said, hey, that's pretty nifty and all, but what if we tried it on people? So the city of London was like, hey, now you're thinking with portals. One freshly executed criminal coming up. Aldini gathered a crowd and applied 2 diodes to the corpse's head, causing his face to scrunch up and one eye to flick open. Aldini was a showman though, he wanted some real action, so he then put the current through opposite points in the body, which made the whole thing flail around like Pinocchio in heat. Now today we know he was just exciting the dead muscles, right? But the people who were watching had no idea what was going on, so they were like, Jesus Christ, this guy's a fucking necromancer. Quick, go get grandma, maybe we can get in the will after all. Fun fact, this experiment actually ended up serving as inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which makes me wonder what other famous novels were based on real life events. Was a white whale ever pursued by a vengeful sea captain? Was there actually a mentally handicapped migrant worker who liked hugging rabbits to death? Was there ever a human soul as profoundly asinine and willfully ignorant as Amelia Bedelia? God, I hate her glassy-eyed face so fucking much. I just want to mash it into a running waffle maker, be like, huh, isn't that ironic? Grab her by her vacant fucking head, throw her out of a 747 and say, hey, why didn't you shoot yourself when you had the chance? Get it! Anyway, one thing we learned today is the importance of reputability. And just as you wouldn't want some dirty carnies jacking your stiff, phrasing, you certainly wouldn't want the same fate to befall your valuable online information. That's why you need to try Dashlane. Dashlane's been all over the place recently, and with good reason. In this day and age, cybersecurity and privacy have never been more important, and only a select few people have the time, energy, and know-how to keep their data as safe as humanly possible. What Dashlane does is, it takes all your passwords and autofill data across all your devices and uses the power of encryption to keep them out of the hands of lowly hackers. PC, Mac, iOS, Android, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, doesn't matter, Dashlane's got your back. Something especially cool about it is that you can automatically change your passwords right in Dashlane, without fiddling with stupid security questions from 6 years ago you don't know the answer to for an hour. Dashlane Premium even comes with a VPN, so now you can take full advantage of unsecured Wi-Fi without ever worrying that the janitor in the back of Starbucks knows about those horrific purchases you're making. So please, go to dashlane.com/salmonella to try Dashlane Premium free for 30 days. Also, the first 200 people who use the promo code Salmonella will get 10% off their Dashlane Premium subscription. By the way, this video ended up being way too long, so stay tuned for part 2 in a week or two. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching. Throw her out of a 747 and say, hey, why didn't you shoot yourself when you had the chance? Get it! Anyway, this video is sponsored by Dashlane. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey kids, hope you had yourself a merry little whatever. I know I did. What do you like best about the holiday experience? My personal favorite part is where we systemically brainwash children into thinking they're supernatural beings who judge their every move and then invade their house at night. Now, everyone knows Santa. Good old Saint Nick. Ol' Father Christmas, ol' Christopher Kringle, ol' Elpheus Prime, slayer of elk and bringer of Xboxes. And you've probably heard of some other characters somewhere too. Guys like Krampus, Belsnickel, Charlie Brown, Xi Jinping. Well, today I want to show you guys some more obscure Yuletide beings from different cultures all across the globe, but mostly Europe. Now, this first creature's name comes from the Welsh. As a matter of moral principle, I personally don't formally recognize the Welsh language. Maybe someday they'll figure out how W's and Y's work, then it'll be a different story, but for the time being, you'll have to excuse me for not condoning bullshit like this. So the thing allegedly called Mari-Lwyd isn't a true mythical creature per se, but more so a tradition carried out for at least the past few centuries in South Wales. No, I mean Old South Wales. This is how it works. Every holiday season, the village rapscallion will take a horse's skull and affix it to the end of a pole. Kinda like one of these things, except, you know, awful. The skull is typically decorated in some way, and sometimes they put in a lever so you can make the mouth move on its own. Then a white sheet is draped over the pole and its holder, thus giving the illusion that Famine himself has come to destroy all your figgy pudding. From here, one would think that the nightly festivities would include welshing your trousers and repenting for a lifetime of naughtiness, but no, it gets better. You know that whole mouth-moving thing? Turns out that's not just for taking wild snaps at the faces of innocent children. The Mari-Lwyd and its party of caretakers will go around to random houses and sing a song about wanting to be let inside. The inhabitants are then expected to sing back with excuses as to why they don't want this abomination in their home. All in rhyme, of course. This goes back and forth until either the Mari-Lwyd gives up, or the party's invited in, at which point they get to raid your pantry and drink all your beer. So if you ever find yourself rap battling a horse skull in South Wales, don't panic. It's normal, I guess. Next we have Frau Perchta, a witch-like being said to visit during the holidays in the alpine regions of Germany and Austria. Depictions of Perchta can range anywhere between beautiful woman and whatever the hell this is, but usually they fall somewhere in between. She's also sometimes shown with this big weird floppy goose foot. That's because she's apparently real into spinning. Not the 2-foot kind though, the 1-foot kind. It's said that this delightful spinster pays a visit to all the little wiener schnitzels on the 12th night of Christmas. If you were well behaved and hard-working this year, she might leave you a small silver coin in your shoe. How kind. But if you've been an inattentive young lady and didn't spin all your flax that year, Perchta will trample all your half-woven fibers as punishment, and you'll say, weird flax, but okay. Fucking cut that out, Jesus. Then there's the stuff Perchta considers especially naughty, which can vary depending on who you ask. If you left your house a mess, or you didn't leave out the traditional bowl of porridge, or maybe you didn't eat your ceremonial fish and gruel on feast day, that's when you've been a real goober. As recompense, she'll rip out your fucking intestines through your abdominal wall and then stuff your empty body cavity with pebbles and straw until you're just as plump as when she started. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. Nobody knows what she does with your freshly harvested innards after she leaves. But being that she lives in the mountains and has an obsession with thread making, I think we can all infer the obvious truth. Of course, no discussion of folklore of any kind can truly be complete without taking a look at Iceland. Between the centuries of isolation and the volcanic fumes constantly spilling out over the countryside, it's no wonder that they're one of the world's biggest exporters of whack-ass mythology. Seriously, according to one 1998 survey, over 54% of Icelandic citizens said they believed in elves. Let me repeat that just so we're all clear. In 1998, the majority of the population of Iceland said they believed in elves, and a very large portion probably still does today. As such, the cast of characters said to visit during the holiday season over there is naturally quite diverse. The main lineup consists of the family pictured here. This is the leader of the bunch, a troll, goblin, ogreish type lady named Grilla. Grilla just fucking eats kids. That's it. She's said to prefer the naughty ones, but as long as it's small and made out of kid, she's game. Then you got her husband, Lepalu, who lives with her in her cave, generally considered to be equally ogreish. When the holidays roll around, if there's no soot in your fireplace, he'll reward you with a pickled herring. But if it's dirty, he'll scoop up the ash and dump it in your bed. Ooh. Nah, just messing with you. None of that's true. He also just eats children. The couple also has a giant cat called, this. The cat's main concern is whether or not a person received new clothes for Christmas. Pretty hypocritical considering it walks around naked all the time, but whatever. Anyway, if you got new clothes, then good for you. You got new clothes. On the other hand, if you didn't get any, well, can you guess what he does? You want to take a wild stab? Yeah, that's exactly right. He fucking eats you. Children, adults, doesn't matter. He'll even vor your dog. He doesn't care. Finally, you got the best of the bunch, the 13 Yule lads, each of which visits on a different day leading up to Christmas. They're kind of like the 7 dwarves, but whereas those guys are jolly and helpful and stupid shit like that, the only real goal of the Yule lads is to harass and inconvenience people as much as possible, and each one has a unique way that they go about doing that. I'm going to go through all 13. Now please remember, I am making none of this up. I'm not even going to try to say the Icelandic names, so I'll just give you guys the English translations, which are very apt by the way. First you got Sheepcoat Clod, who goes around harassing sheep, but he's easy to catch on account of his peg legs. Then there's Gully Gulk, who hides in gullies to steal milk from your cows. There's Stubby, he's real short. He eats the leftover crust out of pie pans. This one's called Spoon Licker, he licks spoons. He's also incredibly thin on account of malnutrition for some reason. There's Pot Scraper, he scrapes pots. And Bowl Licker, who's like Spoon Licker. The key difference here being that he licks bowls. You got Door Slammer, who slams doors in the middle of the night. And then Skyr Gobbler, who gobbles up all your skyr, which is like a Nordic yogurt type thing. Whoa, who's that up in the rafters? It's Sausage Swiper, of course. Here to swipe your sausages. And who's that in the windows? You bet your ass it's Window Peeper. Look at him peep. And who could forget our favorite, Doorway Sniffer, who sniffs your doorway with his giant freakish nose to seek out bread. There's Meat Hook, he steals your meat with a hook. And finally, Candle Stealer, who fucking, you get the picture. So, if you know some kids who just won't behave, maybe it's time to take a page out of Iceland's book come next holiday season. Now remember, your friend dressed up as Grilla doesn't have to actually eat the kids. Just bite them a couple times, that'll be enough. Anyway, with New Year's right around the corner, the time comes to make our New Year's resolutions. While you may spend New Year's Eve getting hella turnt, why not spend New Year's Day getting hella learnt? You can do just that with Skillshare.org. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. Beyond technical skills, there's plenty of lifestyle type stuff on here that'd be perfect for building the 2019 you. Check this one out. Beat procrastination once and for all. Maybe if I had taken this course, this video would have been out, before Christmas. Do you speak any other languages? Well, you could. Believe me, I get a lot of joy of shoving my français down other people's throats. If you try one of these guys on for size, you could be doing the same in no time. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my viewers. The first 500 people who visit the link in the description will get 2 months of unlimited access to the 25,000 plus classes on Skillshare for absolutely free. What are you waiting for? Go! Don't just stare at me with your glassy eyes. People are taking them already. Go, hurry, run! Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Nah, but seriously, fuck Swift the cockatiel. Look at this ugly tree-sniffing idiot. I hope he gets AIDS. I mean it.
Hey kids, let's talk about Fidel Castro. We're all familiar with Castro, right? Dictator of Cuba for the whole second half of the 20th century, main antagonist of the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know. Anyway, this man loves three things. He loves Cuba, he loves communism, and good God, does the man love dairy. Yep, you heard me right. The all-powerful dictator of communist Cuba is obsessed with anything related to milk and its derivatives. I drew up a little chart here, right? I call it the Leche Lovin' Ladder. At the bottom you got dairy farmers, then you got Ross O'Donovan, then Mr. Bones, then starving babies, and then all the way up at the top here, you got Fidel Castro. Today, I'm going to share a few true stories that illustrate his preoccupation. Okay, the first one isn't really a story so much as a fact, but according to several sources, Castro was known to be able to eat 18 scoops of ice cream after a meal. That's more than 2 pints. If that doesn't impress you, then go try it for yourself. Me, I can barely manage a pint and a half on an empty stomach, and Castro's doing it on top of a full meal. But it gets better. Being such an ice cream connoisseur, Castro ordered the construction of an ice cream shop. But this isn't your average everyday parlor, not by a long shot. He built a straight up ice cream complex taking up an entire city block. This was a piece of modern architecture too, in total contrast to the surrounding slums, all for the sake of ice cream. The place is called Coppelia, and it's still open today. Of course, Castro's obsession went beyond just personal pleasure. Dairy was so dear to him that it often found its way into diplomatic interactions. Like one time, a French diplomat came to visit, so Castro whips out some Cuban cheese. Specifically though, it was Camembert cheese, a variety that France is famous for. French guy was like, hey, not bad, it's almost as good as the French kind. Try it again. I think you'll find it's even better than the French. Alright, I wouldn't say that. I'm sorry, are you disrespecting my cheese? In my house? On my island? No, I mean it's good, I just said the French kind is better. Maybe if you froggy fucks bathed once in a while, you'd be able to taste the cheese instead of your own B.O. Listen, you've got your cigars, we've got our cheese, live with it. Fine. Fuck him, it's good cheese. I'm paraphrasing just a little bit, but that's basically how it went down. So already it's obvious that dairy is of great value to Castro. Most exceptional, however, is how this value reflected in his leadership. Naturally, having an entire nation at his disposal, Castro wanted to bolster the Cuban dairy industry as much as possible. But there was one problem. Cuba initially had two types of cows called La Reinas and Zebus. La Reinas came from the days when Spain ruled Cuba, and Zebus originated from India. Both of these cows are well suited to the Cuban environment, having a very high tolerance for heat. However, they don't produce much milk, they're mostly just raised for their meat. So Castro decides to import thousands of Holsteins from Canada. Holsteins are the classic black and white cows, and as we all know, you can juice these guys for days. They are utterly superior. Only problem is, they're used to living in Canada, so when they're plopped down under the scorching Caribbean sun, it's going to stress them out. They're not going to be laughing cows by any means. So as a result, Castro's imports still didn't put out enough milk to satisfy his desires. At this point, your average run-of-the-mill dairy queen would have given up. But Castro, he's more than that. He's a dairy dictator. So he ordered the construction of a giant air-conditioned complex with the sole purpose of providing a comfortable environment for his Holsteins. And it helped a little bit, but they were still stressed out. They still weren't putting out at their natural levels. And as you can imagine, climate controlling an entire facility is very expensive, so Castro was forced to abandon the project. But like the astronaut he is, Castro held on to his dream of finding the Milky Way. So he gathered a team of scientists and farmers and ordered them to breed together the Zebus and the Holsteins in order to produce a heat-resistant, lactose-pumping super cow. The breeding efforts were mostly a bust, never producing the bovine master race that Castro longed for. However, there was one exception. Under Castro's program, a single individual was born that met his expectations with flying colors. The cow was named Ubre Blanca, Spanish for white udder, and she produced world record-breaking volumes of milk, peaking at 110 liters a day. That's more than 29 entire gallons of lactation. Needless to say, Castro was absolutely euphoric at this isolated success of his. To say he went ballistic would be an understatement. He went intercontinentally ballistic. Like, India hasn't got shit on the levels of cow worship that Castro performed. Daily updates were published in the Cuban national newspaper describing Ubre Blanca's health and productivity. And when she died in 1985, Castro commissioned a giant marble statue of the cow
cow in her honor. He also had scientists harvest tissue and egg samples for the sake of preserving her DNA. After Ubreblanca's death, Castro's plans for the Cuban dairy industry got even more desperate and ridiculous somehow. This is based off of an actual conversation that he had with his team of scientists in 1987. Okay guys, hear me out. What if we make cows that are the size of dogs, so that way they can live in people's apartments with them? Fidel, I don't think that's gonna work. No, it'll work. You just have to grow grass in the apartment too. You can't be serious. Yeah, you just gotta put up some fluorescent lights. Bam, little grazing patch for your doggy cow. You are a fucking lunatic. And obviously nothing ever came of that idea, and Cuba's dairy industry is still floundering today, sadly. So yeah, if you haven't gotten the picture by now, the dude likes milk. Imagine he's at the birth of his grandson, right? Ah, what a beautiful baby boy. Fidel, there's something we need to tell you. Your grandson, he's lactose intolerant. Prepare the firing squad. Anyway, there's plenty of other miscellaneous stories surrounding his little preoccupation, like the time the CIA tried to poison his milkshake, so I just decided to highlight a few big ones. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey kids, you're probably familiar with at least a few characters whose obsessive penny pinching truly knows no bounds. Yes, from Ebenezer Scrooge to Scrooge McDuck, nobody hoards money quite like misers. But these guys aren't the most miserly misers out there, not by a long shot. First of all, look at their top hats, their extravagant use of glasses, their luxurious chairs. These things are worth their weight in precious shekels. No true miser would waste their wealth on such frills. Second of all, these guys aren't real. They're fictional characters. Scrooge McDuck does not exist. I don't care what CNN says, it's all liberal conspiracy bullshit. I mean, look at this article by the Huffington Post. You mean to tell me that this picture isn't photoshopped? Ridiculous. But you know who was real? One Daniel Dancer of London, England. Born in 1716, Daniel's father died at a young age, leaving behind a large agricultural estate for Daniel to oversee. When it was first inherited, the property brought in a few £100s a year, which doesn't sound like much today, but given that a general laborer could be expected to make around £19 per year in 1710, it's safe to say that Dancer could afford to live a fairly lavish lifestyle off his passive income alone. But Dan was like, you know, all this food and clothing and stuff is alright, but you know what I really like? Owning money. Say, how much does a pound cost? Well, that's a complicated question, Daniel. Can currency really be said to have intrinsic value? Some economists believe that— TLDR please, they cost a pound. Jesus, that's a lot. I better start saving. Thus began one of the most intentionally frugal lifestyles history has ever seen. Let me walk you through a few of Dancer's day-to-day habits. First of all, soap, don't even think about it. The closest thing to bathing that Daniel did was during the summer months when, once or twice a week, he'd wade into the nearby pond and scrub his face with a handful of sand. Say what you will, but what he lacked in deodorization, he certainly made up for in exfoliation. Admittedly, all of London probably reeked to high hell back then, so while Daniel's smell might not have tipped people off to his eccentricity, his clothes almost certainly did. On a good day, he'd be seen in one of his coats, which were homemade patchwork abominations of various garments that Dancer found on the streets and local dust heaps, looking like a walking dementia patient sewing circle. Similarly, all his shoes were either scavenged or Frankensteined out of other pairs of shoes he already owned, with the whole ensemble being barely held together with haphazardly tied bands made of the hay grown on his estate. In fact, a lot of the time, he'd ditch normal clothes altogether and just wear the hay. To his credit, in his youth, Daniel was known to purchase a whole 2 shirts per year as his clothing expense, but one day he looked in the mirror and said, "Daniel, you're bleeding funds like a stuck pig. It's time to grow up and get your act together," and cut his budget to only 1 shirt per year. One of the few people that Daniel associated with regularly was his sister, whom he lived with. Believe it or not, she shared in a lot of Daniel's tight-fisted habits, and it definitely showed. She was described as, quote, having more the appearance of a walking dunghill than one of the fair sex. Couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. Dancer prepared all of his food for the upcoming week ahead of time, consisting of only 14 hard dumplings and 3 pounds of beef stretched out over the entire 7-day period. Every day, he'd eat only a single meal that was basically equivalent to 2 wads of dried out dough and 1.5 quarter-pounder patties from McDonald's. He kept this habit up for years without fail, except for one time when he stumbled upon a fully intact, rotting sheep carcass during his daily stroll. He was like, "Good lord, this is just obscene. Who would leave a perfectly good pile of arguably edible meat and organs just sitting around like this?" So he dragged the thing home and made him and his sister a nice big pile of spoiled mutton pies, which they subsisted off of for several weeks. That's a real life hack right there. Who needs refrigeration if it's already rancid, am I right? Despite Daniel's rabid fear of any unnecessary spending, he did own a dog named Bob that he was quite fond of. At this point, I'm almost certain that Dancer just decided to base his entire life off of linoleum by no effects, which is pretty incredible considering linoleum wasn't even invented for another 100 years. Anyway though, one day, Daniel's neighbor came to complain about how Bob had been harassing his sheep. So Daniel said, "Don't worry boy, I ain't gonna kill you, but we don't want a lawsuit on our hands, do we?" "No we don't. What would we do if a lawyer came around here, huh?" "That's right, and make his children watch, yeah." So he decided to take the dog to the local farrier, which is basically a blacksmith that specializes in horseshoes and the like. "Hey, could you make my dog, not have teeth anymore?" What kind of business you think I'm running here, boy?" "Come on, man, you file down horses' hooves for a living. Teeth are just tiny mouth hooves. That's close." "Sorry, buddy, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades." Well, got me there. Say, what's a hand grenade? None of my sources say what happened to the dog after his untimely nubbening, but I do know Dan never got sued, so I guess the operation was a success. Daniel's sister passed away in 1766, leaving him so distraught that he actually went out of his way to buy mourning clothes for her funeral. And by that I mean he bought a pair of secondhand black stockings, and that's it. Still, that's a big deal when it comes to the likes of Dancer. At this point, the only person close to a friend that Dancer had was a woman known as Lady Tempest. She was so influential over him that she was actually able to convince him to buy, get this, a 1 shilling hat. This was quite an accomplishment, as Daniel's last hat was older than half of you at 14 years old. "What? I'm not! You don't!"
Meow.
"You." Of course, the next time Lady Tempest went to hang out with him, he was still wearing his old disgusting hat. When questioned about the one he bought, he goes, "Oh yeah, that frilly old thing. Sold it for a 6 pence profit. Super easy too. I tell you, forget house flipping. Hat flipping is going to be the cool new thing pretty soon." Lo and behold, 250 years later, he was wrong. Daniel died at the ripe old age of 78, which seems pretty shocking considering the whole not using soap, eating rotten food thing, but I guess his near total isolation from other people made up for that when it came to preventing illness. Though he never ended up shelling out any of the massive hoard of wealth that he accumulated over this time, his efforts weren't completely in vain. By the time he passed away, Daniel's estate was now pulling in about £3,000 in yearly net revenue, 10 times the amount it earned when he first inherited it. So, moral of the story, parsimony has its place. While it's good to save money, don't torture yourself just for the sake of a few bucks. Next time your parent or significant other insists on turning down the thermostat or keeping the windows up to save gas, just say, "Hey, are we human or are we Dancer?" But you know what else is more valuable than money?
Knowledge.
That's why you need to try Skillshare.com. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 23,000 classes in technology, design, business, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. Want to learn how to budget your life without turning into a filthy carcass-eating loner? Try the Core 4 of personal finance. You'll learn all the money management skills that really should be taught in school but aren't in no time. If you're looking for something a little more ambitious, it's never too early or too late to try your hand at entrepreneurship. With some of these classes, you can turn that one genius business idea that you and your friends had that one night into reality. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my viewers, where you can get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. To sign up, go to skl.sh/samo4. Again, you with the eyebrows, go to skl.sh/sam04 to get 2 months of unlimited access to over 23,000 classes for less than $1 technically. Act now for this special offer and start learning today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching. Hey kids, you know what's cool? Entomology. Etymology. There we go. Today we're going to talk about some words, some combinations thereof, and where they come from. First is the phrase white elephant. Now for those out of the loop, a white elephant is a possession which its owner cannot dispose of and whose cost, particularly that of maintenance, is out of proportion to its usefulness. And also a game played during the holidays for people who prefer random garbage over actual personalized presents. According to legend, this saying dates back to the monarchs of Siam. Whenever one of the king's courtiers drew his displeasure through whatever means, he would offer them a gift of a white elephant. It was considered the ultimate insult to refuse a gift from the king, so naturally the elephantee would be forced to accept. Now if you know elephants as well as I do, you would know that they are frickin' gigantic. They can consume around 50 gallons of water and 500 pounds of foliage every day, which would be quite expensive to keep up in modern times, let alone hundreds of years ago. Plus these ones are albino, so you have to hose them down with SPF 30 once an hour or else they'll turn into one big tumor. Okay, not really, but they definitely needed their shade. Also, Southeast Asian cultures considered white elephants sacred, so you weren't allowed to make the animal work, and you'd have to hire a load of people to care for it on a daily basis. Basically, the person getting the gift would have to choose between financial ruin or letting it die and being socially ostracized and possibly even killed. I thought this whole thing was pretty clever, so I've started doing my own version. Whenever someone gets on my nerves, I spray paint progressive comments all over their house. That way, they'll have to spend the whole day angrily scrubbing it off, and then the neighbors will be like, wait, does that mean he likes the N-word? Bigoted scum. Next is balls to the wall. This one harkens back to the days when planes flew in the air. The throttle of many aircrafts would be controlled with either a lever or a plunger, either of which were often topped with a sphere for easy handling. Thus, when you wanted to throw the plane into max thrust, you'd put the balls to the wall. In a similar vein, the phrase balls deep comes from pinball machines. When you want to launch the ball full force, you pull the plunger all the way back, otherwise known as going balls deep. Nah, just kidding. That one actually means what you think it does. Next is getting your goat, a phrase used when someone or something annoys you. The origin of this phrase is still disputed by etymologists, but one theory traces back to the sport of horse racing. In order to stop horses from getting nervous before a race, their owners would stick a goat in the stables to keep them calm. Apparently, the presence of a goat has some kind of therapeutic effect on horses, kinda like a therapy dog, except they can't pet it on account of hooves, so they just sniff it for a while, I guess. Cut to a pack of young hooligans looking for something to do besides bootlegging and getting polio. They decide to break into the stables at night and escort the goat to an undisclosed location. Then when the race starts, instead of running straight ahead like a normal person, the horse would run into the crowd and dropkick a grandma or whatever, and the old crotchety oil tycoon who owns the horse would stand up, shaking his cane, yelling, "Those punks really get my goat." Thanks to modern medicine, anxious horses today can instead be given horsey Xanax to calm them down, which unfortunately means that the days of hot-blooded goat getting are over. However, some would argue that stealing horse tranquilizers can be equally rewarding in its own way. But enough of that mumbo jumbo. Hey, speaking of which, you ever wonder where mumbo jumbo comes from? Nice segue, Sam. Thanks, Sam. Anyway, strap in kids, this one's gonna be good. Mumbo Jumbo originates from the Mandingo people of West Africa. The Mandingos were a polygamous culture, and whenever a domestic quarrel broke out, they would soon hear animalistic screaming coming from the woods. They look over, and out runs this guy, known as Mumbo Jumbo. Now Mumbo Jumbo's arrival was considered a big deal to the Mandingo. The whole tribe would sing and dance in the town center until midnight, at which point Mr. Jumbo would settle the dispute. And by settle the dispute, I mean tie the female to a post and slap her upside the head with a stick for an hour, while the rest of the village watched, all hootin' and a-hollerin'. And then he'd run screaming back into the woods, where he would remain until the next complaint arose. What the Mandingo women didn't know is that Mumbo Jumbo is not, in fact, a wild patriarchal deity from the forest, but merely the offending woman's husband or one of his friends wearing a costume made from tree bark and leaves. Anyway, the guy would be babbling nonsense the whole time, which is where the phrase Mumbo Jumbo is derived from. So next time one of your superiors uses the words Mumbo Jumbo in a jocular fashion, remember to report them to HR for promoting African wife beating. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching. Hey kids. Animal test subjects have always been an important facet of science, since they allow us to study physiology in more destructive ways than we could get away with on humans. So it should come as no surprise that, over the years, there's been a lot of creatures haphazardly thrown at the cosmos against their will. Here's a bunch of smelly animals that achieved more in their short lives than you ever will. Quick disclaimer, this is by no means a comprehensive list, not even close. We'd be here all day if it was. More so just a highlight reel of the ones I found the most interesting. So the Great Zoo in the Sky was first founded in 1947 when the US launched a craft containing a bunch of fruit flies 68 miles into the air in order to see what kind of horrible mutants would get made from all the cosmic radiation up there. Unfortunately, they were totally fine, so the Earth was like, hey, living things can go into space and not die instantly, supple. And the next year they decided to send up a rhesus macaque named Albert, which it seems kind of like jumping the gun to go from barely alive specks to basically a person in one step. If it were me, I would have thrown like a frog or a gerbil in between there, but whatever, I'm no cosmopolitan. Anyway, Albert died of suffocation on the way up and never really made it to space alive. Fun fact, this rocket was actually a V-2 missile stolen from the Germans after World War II. So just in case any of you have any sympathy for those Nazi characters, they're technically responsible for the death of a poor innocent space monkey. Pretty condemning if you ask me. But I guess the US felt pretty bad about it, so they decided to deal with their grief by naming the next monkey Albert 2. Pretty unhealthy coping mechanism according to my shrink, but she also thinks Punk is dead, so what does she know? This Albert actually made it into space alive through a grand effort incorporating all the incredible cutting-edge technology that the atomic era had to offer. And after all that, they goofed on the parachute, so Albert 2 turned into a fine red mist on impact, which just goes to prove the age-old adage, you can lead a monkey to space, but you can't make him land. There were a few more Alberts after this. Albert 3 fucking exploded. Albert 4 made it up, but he had another tissue paper parachute what don't work for heck, so he's out. Albert 5, yet again, bad chute, liquefied on impact, until finally, in 1951, on Albert number 6, they figured out how to make a big blanket that consistently makes you not immediately die when you fall from the sky, and the monkey was recovered alive from the capsule, alongside his 11 mouse roommates. Of course, he died 2 hours later, but hey, still counts. Earlier that same year, Russia launched 2 little pupniks named Tsigan and Dzik, both of whom came back unharmed. These 2 were the first vertebrates to ever leave Earth and come back alive. Then in 57, the Reds snagged another achievement by putting the first living thing into orbit, besides the bacteria clinging to Sputnik 1, but they're losers, we don't talk about them. Specifically, they launched one brave and daring dog from the streets of Moscow, probably the most famous animal to ever go into space. You know its name well. That dog is, of course, Airbud. Unlike those other guys we talked about, Laika was never planned to be recovered intact, since we barely knew how to put something into orbit by this time, let alone bring it back. But they still wanted to make sure she stayed alive long enough to at least reach space. So before the mission, they put her through the most rigorous canine space camp that Russia had to offer, throwing her in a centrifuge for a while to get her used to G-force, making her cage progressively smaller to get her used to cramped spaces, which made her just not shit anymore at all, but that's a different story. They also switched her diet to a special high nutrition gel that she would have eaten after takeoff, you know, had her brain not crapped out from overheating within the first few hours. In 59, the US strapped 2 monkeys to the nose cone of a Jupiter missile and actually got them back alive afterwards, which is crazy mostly because these things withstood 38 Gs of acceleration. For context, that's the force that makes even trained pilots lose consciousness times 4, or this thing times 12, or roughly the same forced experience when you realize that's not a normal speed bump, but one of those evil tiny ones that ruin your life, you know the ones. Well, that's what you get for doing 25 near a hospital, Sam. Well, hey, good thing I'm already here considering the ballistics test that just went down between the roof of my car and my frickin' skull. Jesus. So in 61, we graduated from monkeys to great apes, sending up a chimpanzee named Ham. Remember Space Chimps? Yeah, it was that. Frame for frame, Andy Samberg and all. What's special about Ham is that he was actually trained to pull levers and slap buttons while up in the ship, being rewarded banana pellets for completing tasks and getting his feet tased whenever he messed up. Sounds like a cartoon, I know, but I promise it's for real. Meanwhile, the Soviets were busy putting a big, bald, smart ape into orbit, no big deal. France saw the US and Russia sending up monkeys and dogs and felt left out, so in 63, they launched a cat into space and were like, yeah, that's cool and unique. I'm one of the popular kids now. In 68, the Soviets Soviets saw the rabbit making rice cakes on the moon and said, how about a tortoise for that hare, launching 2 of them into deep space, all the way around the moon and back to Earth, where they were recovered alive after their capsule landed in the ocean. Kinda cheating when you are your own crash suit, but an impressive feat regardless. In 73, we put mummy chogs in space. What's a mummy chog? It's one of these things. Like a fish, but real rough and tumble. Tolerates low oxygen, weird pressure, high salinity, dishwasher safe, Energy Star rated, you name it, sister. At first they could only swim in circles, but after a couple weeks they actually adapted to zero G and figured out how to maneuver properly. Even more interesting, we also brought mummy chog eggs, and when these hatched, the little mummy choglets knew how to swim in zero G immediately. Kinda spooky, honestly. That same mission also sent up some spiders who managed to spin some webs. Trash webs, mind you, but hey, they managed. In 78, the Muppet Show aired Pigs in Space for the first time. In 85, we cut off the arms of a bunch of newts and sent them up to see if they grow back the same way. The reasoning behind this being, if a newt can't grow stuff back, then an astronaut with a paper cut probably can't either. Fortunately, they rearmed themselves at the normal rate, so all's good on that front. Around the same time, NASA actually had talks with Sesame Street about sending Big Bird up on the space shuttle as a publicity stunt. This is real. The plan ultimately fell through after they realized Big Bird is fucking giant and unwieldy at all times, literally the worst possible choice for a celebrity cameo on a space shuttle. So instead they sent a school teacher in his place. And then the Challenger fucking exploded. Let me reiterate. There is a timeline not too far from this one where Big Bird is a casualty in the single worst astronautical disaster in history. A tiny evil part of me almost wishes that happened, like that's just so indescribably absurd. In the early 90s, we set up some baby jellyfish to grow up in space just for laughs. They figured out how to maneuver just fine, but when we brought them back down, they literally didn't have a concept of gravity and couldn't orient themselves properly in their new environment. Which, being a jellyfish is the easiest thing there is. You just kinda exist, maybe squirm a little now and then. So when you manage to somehow mess that up, you know things have gone seriously wrong. In 2003, the US sent up a bunch of invertebrates, including silkworms, spiders, carpenter bees, and harvester ants. Whoops, they exploded. In 07, some tardigrades went up, totally exposed to the vacuum of space for 10 days, which, surprise, surprise, they were fine. On that same mission, a cockroach gave birth, creating the first organism that we know of to ever have been conceived outside of Earth. And finally, in 2018, Elon Musk sent a big basket of mice to the International Space Station. Just, you know, 'cause he can. So those are just a handful of God's creatures who got to experience the majesty of not knowing up from down. If you're like me, you're probably a little jealous. Why does an ugly ape get to go into space, but I don't? I wish to bear witness to the music of the spheres firsthand, in a way that a lower creature could never appreciate. You know why you feel like that? Because you're a nerd. And what better way to fill that space-shaped space in your shriveled nerd heart than a vast collection of high-quality documentaries? That's why you need to try CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream was founded by the dude behind the Discovery Channel, and it's an absolute treasure trove if you're someone like me who feeds off useless knowledge like a loach sucking algae off a fish tank. And with over 2,400 titles, a lot of which are CuriosityStream exclusives, it'd be hard not to find something that interests you. I personally recommend Deep Ocean, The Lost World of the Pacific. There's some freaky things down there, like basically aliens. The whole thing's just one massive trip. You can get unlimited access to their full library for just $2.99 a month. I know it's a cliche, but that's literally less than a cup of Starbucks coffee a month. Also, you can get your first 30 days completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/salmonella and use promo code salmonella during the sign up process. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and I still don't know what Ligma is.
Hey kids, remember the plague, malaria, smallpox? Kinda bad, right? Well, guess what? They're peanuts compared to the level of destruction that's been wreaked over the years across the kingdom next door. Today, I'm gonna talk about some of the most interesting diseases to ever strike the world of plants. The most famous one is probably the potato blight. It's a fungus that attacks potatoes. This is what it looks like. On the left, we have a healthy potato, while on the right, we have a blighty one. Notice how this one is noble and robust, like a lion's heart, while the other is shriveled and black, like Betsy DeVos's uterus. You could try to eat it, but it's basically like rotting cork. You wouldn't get very far. So in 1845, Ireland relied a lot on potatoes, right? That's because their soil was dumb, and that's the most nutritious thing they could grow. Then the blight came, and all their food turned to poo. 1 million starved, 2 million left. They came to America. They brought freckles, and these things. Hoity-toity-toy, now we have the Celtics. Next is the chestnut blight, which infects, you guessed it, the elderly. Wait, no, that's shingles. Chestnut blight infects American chestnut trees, which once populated a huge portion of the South and Mid-Atlantic regions of the country. Key word: once. During the early 20th century, the blight arrived, which ended up killing around 4 billion trees over the course of a couple decades. Hey, remember that time 4 billion giant things died inexplicably? Me neither. Nobody does. Let me give some perspective on the situation. Those trees were huge, like 40 meters tall apiece. That means 160 million kilometers of tree was destroyed by this disease. That's long enough to get from the Earth to the Sun with 10 million kilometers to spare. Here's another. If we take the volume of all these trees, we get 126 billion cubic meters. If we burn that much wood, we get 861 quadrillion joules of energy. That's the amount released by the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, times 10,000. So yeah, kind of a big deal. But who cares, right? Why worry about 4 billion dumb smelly old trees when there's 1,000 whole pandas that need our help? Isn't that right, WWF? You populist scum. Anyway, moving on. This next one is called, get ready, broom rape. I'm serious. Broom rape. Broom rape. Wikipedia, broom rape. Naked broom rape. Imagine if we gave human illnesses names like that. I'm sorry, Sam, but you have urethra cactus. I would just end it right there. Doesn't even matter what the actual symptoms are. Anyway, broom rape is considered a parasitic plant. This is what it does. The seeds of the broom rape will hang out in the soil for years until the roots of a host plant come along. When they do, the broom rape bursts out of its shell and immediately starts leeching off the other organism. Eventually, once they grow enough, they'll breach the surface with these little flowers. Notice, no leaves, no green. Who needs chlorophyll when you're a filthy freeloader, right? These flowers get fertilized and the whole thing starts over. Just one of these guys isn't a big deal to the host. But once you get enough, they have the potential to suck an entire farm dry, causing sweeping crop failure. Pun definitely intended. Next is this one. There's a few different ways you can pronounce it depending on your social standing, ranging from ergot to elgo. Being the disheveled pauper I am, I prefer ergot. Rolls off the tongue, you know. Ergot is a fungus that mainly infects grains like wheat, barley, and especially rye. And it's capable of producing a whole soup of compounds called alkaloids, which can have a variety of effects on the human body. Most of them not fun, mostly spasms and diarrhea, that kind of thing. However, one particular alkaloid called ergotamine structurally resembles LSD and has a similar function when it enters the body. So a medieval peasant would be sitting there, eating a nice loaf of rye bread, just minding his own business. Then all of a sudden, holy shit, I'm blasting out of both ends! My heart's a seizing, my lungs a wheezing, the fucking walls are melting, I can hear Satan's voice, he's telling me to invest in Apple. What does that mean? Why does he want me to buy apples? This would go on for like a day. Sometimes their fingers and toes would fall off, but then they'd be alright. Unless they weren't. Moral of the story, kids, don't eat strange bread. You could trip balls and die. One more thing before we end today's video, I've decided to launch a second channel for all the dumb stuff I think of that doesn't fit the Academy format. It's called Salmonella Vlog. Go check it out. It's in the description. I wrote a slam poem. It's there. Go look. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching. Hey kids, I was inspired to make this video while doing research on the ancient medicine man, Galen. Apparently, he would often do experiments on animals in order to learn more about the body, his favorite of which was the Barbary ape, due to its anatomical similarity to humans. Now when I say experiments, I don't mean push a button, get a peanut type things. I'm talking like Josef Mengele meets the plague dogs. He'd clamp their pee tubes shut just to watch their kidneys swell, cut their spinal cords in different places to see what went limp and what didn't, and squeeze their brains and make them go unconscious, to name a few. My initial reaction was, hey, that's neat. But then, after some thought, I was like, whoa, hold the phone. In 200 AD, you couldn't get a doorknob even. Yet, if you had the right resources, you could order a goddamn monkey. Many monkeys, in fact. By the barrelful, presumably. Alternatively, if you were born in the right place, you could be the monkey poacher, making a living wrestling up some primates with nothing more than a net, a pokey thing, a hole in the ground, and a whole lot of ambition. So I got to thinking, what other kind of animals did ancient Rome have access to? Apparently basically everything that lived in this part of the map. They were particularly fond of elephants, and it's easy to see why. Sure, elephants aren't that big of a deal to the average person today, right? You've been seeing pictures of them since you were 2, big whoop. But imagine if you were a 20-year-old man who had never seen an elephant in your life. The closest thing you've ever witnessed is like horses, maybe some deer now and then. You get drafted, you go out to battle, you're a little scared, but you've been trained well, you're ready. Then, over the horizon, you see 20 house-sized behemoths with giant tentacles sticking out of their faces, horns longer than your body sticking out of their mouths, all screaming their weird trumpety scream, making your whole body vibrate like Mars himself is shitting on your very existence. So naturally, Rome loved to show these things off all the time, just as a display of power. Like, imagine if you were going to a speech in DC, and Trump rolls up with a pack of dragons. You'd listen to every word he said. He's got fucking dragons. That's what it was like seeing the emperor parade around with elephants back in the day. Of course, that wasn't the only use they had for imported animals. When they weren't being shown off in menageries, many of the exotic beasts brought to Rome were used in shows called venatios, which were basically like modern day bullfights, only instead of bulls, you had whatever crazy critters the state could find. Lions, crocodiles, gazelles, whatever. Around 55 BC, Roman statesman Pompey the Great decided to organize one such event, the feature creature of which was, you guessed it, an elephant. Unfortunately, Pompey forgot a crucial Barnum and Bailey trade secret. See, you're supposed to break the elephant's spirit before the show, not during. So the boys get to poking and the thing starts freaking out, just screaming and crying, even gesturing towards the audience like it was begging for mercy. Now the crowd at this kind of event was mainly composed of dirty, bloodthirsty peasants, and even they were like, holy shit, this is messed up. I came here for a nice, family-friendly disemboweling or two, but this, just deplorable. Then they all start crying, and the whole thing just ends up being a huge mess. Anyway, these types of spectacles became larger and larger as time went on. It's said that Emperor Trajan once held a venatio lasting 120 days, during which some 11,000 animals were killed. They also got pretty elaborate. A lot of creativity went into keeping things fresh for the crowd. In 203 AD, they had a model of a crashed ship built inside the arena, and an assortment of 400 animals were set loose from the wreckage and then killed. That's what we should do for the next Super Bowl halftime show, honestly. Just pack every team's mascot into a decommissioned submarine. Then, when they all run out, we have the troops gun them down while the national anthem plays in the background. Anyway, the ingenuity of the people organizing these events really knew no bounds. One time they tied together a bear and a bull just to see what they'd do. Unfortunately, all that happened was the stock market crashed. Also, fun fact, one Emperor Commodus is credited with the invention of a unique crescent-shaped arrow designed specifically to decapitate ostriches and watch them run around headless for a while. Seriously, they did that so often that they needed a device to make the job easier. Sometimes, just to shake things up, they'd have the animals kill the people, which was known as damnatio ad bestias. This form of execution was typically carried out using lions, but other beasts were used as well, including dogs, bears, and at one point even an eagle, although the guy was crucified first, so it wasn't much of a fight. So, moral of the story, if you ever end up in ancient Rome and you want to see some animals, you'll still have access to almost all the same creatures we see in zoos today, and the only catch is that something has to die at the end. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Hey kids, can I tell you a secret? Come here, closer. Nuclear energy? It's not a bad thing. Sure, 30 years ago, things like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island were certainly something to worry about. Today, however, it's a different story. Let me tell you kids about thorium. Thorium is uranium's neighbor, just 2 houses down. He's a lot like uranium, just he's a lot more chill. Uranium's the type to do a half-assed job during the day and spend every night doing Jaeger bombs and blasting Kendrick Lamar, you know the type. Thorium, on the other hand, is more career-oriented, and at the end of the day, he's cool with just watching Netflix, eating Ben & Jerry's. Let me walk you through all the steps of nuclear power, and you'll see why thorium is so great. Let's start with mining. So when somebody doesn't feel like getting out of bed, they'll, whine and moan and roll over. Likewise, when uranium doesn't want to get out of bed, he releases deadly cancer-inducing radon gas. This means workers have to put up expensive ventilation systems just to, not die. Thorium's chill. You go to wake him up, he understands he's got a job to do. Goes without a fuss. And even when you do get uranium up, like the lazy bastard he is, he has much less concentration in his ore compared to thorium, so more work has to be done just to get the same amount of material. The Earth's crust also has much more thorium in total than uranium, about 3 times as much. So you got your ore, and you've extracted it. Ready for work, right? Wrong. You see, natural uranium mainly consists of 2 different isotopes, uranium-235 and uranium-238. 238 kinda sucks at life, so uranium has to undergo enrichment to up its concentration of 235. Uranium's kinda like that kid with ADHD, right? You got him in the building, but you still gotta give him his own little room and a couple Ritalin before he starts doing anything productive. That's expensive. Thorium, on the other hand, look at him. He's got his sneakers laced, glasses on, he's ready to go. No enrichment needed. Finally, you're ready to make some power. This part's important, kids, pay attention. So this is where the biggest difference between uranium and thorium comes in. You see, uranium is fissile, whereas thorium is fertile. This means uranium can do his job all by himself, just doing his thing all on his own, whereas thorium's kind of a cripple. He needs a little bit of someone else just to give him the push he needs to start releasing energy. This might sound like a bad thing, but if you think about it, it's a lot safer. If you've got your power production process started, and shit suddenly hits the fan, uranium's just gonna keep going. You can try to move him around, cool him down or whatever, but at the end of the day, this man's gonna be swinging, and it's not gonna be a good day for anyone. Thorium, he's only got 1 leg. Piss him off, he takes a swing at you. Just push him over, you're good. Please note, Salmonella Academy does not condone pushing cripples. And that's what thorium reactors do. They allow the barely radioactive liquid thorium to drain away from its helper in the event of an accident, so there's no way for things to escalate. Much safer. But while the process for thorium is better, most of the time people care more about the results. Well, it just so happens thorium is pimpin' in that regard as well. CERN estimates that 1 ton of thorium is capable of producing as much energy as 200 tons of uranium. That's a lot. To compare, that's also equivalent to 3.5 million tons of coal. But let's talk about byproducts. Thorium, being as pure as it is compared even to enriched uranium, produces about 100 times less nuclear waste. So whereas we might not have as many X-Men, that also means much less work has to be done to dispose of the material. Additionally, it's very difficult to make a nuclear weapon out of thorium, since it can't do much on its own. The only thing that's really weaponizable about thorium plants is that little bit of helper material I talked about earlier. But overall, that's a pretty minuscule amount. That means we can feel a lot better about plopping these plants down in places like Iran. So kids, you heard it here first. Thorium is the future. Powerful, clean, reliable, and if things go wrong at the end of the day, you can still kick its ass. Hey kids, let's talk about babies for a second. Now I think we can all agree, generally, babies suck at most things, either literally or figuratively. They have almost no life skills whatsoever. However, as it turns out, babies do actually have some traits that make them superior to adults in certain isolated aspects. In this video, I'm going to tell you guys about a few. First is the baby's non-drowning reflex. If babies under the age of 6 months are put underwater, they'll instinctively hold their breath. Additionally, their heartbeat begins to slow down as soon as they're submerged, which allows them to use much less oxygen and, as a result, stay alive much longer than the average person. As we all know, babies get themselves into bad situations all the time. Soon as your back is turned, they're off trying to lick another socket or whatever. So this reflex probably evolved from back in the day, right? Mom's off picking berries, baby wanders off, ends up in the middle of a lake, and somehow this whole reflex thing gives the village more time to, go get a raft and fish them out. Next is a baby's grip. They're able to support their entire body weight with just one hand, which is more than a lot of adults can do. Of course, it's kind of cheating because they only weigh as much as a baby, but it's still kind of impressive. This trait is shared by apes, whose babies instinctively cling on to the backs of their mothers. So that way, if she gets a little courageous swinging from branch to branch, the baby doesn't just go flying. Anyway, because of this, it's speculated that babies actually got their firm grasp from our ape ancestors millions of years ago. And it's only a bit later in life when your genetics go, oh yeah, legs neat, and ditch the whole grabby thing. Next, babies are also very seductive. Not in the sense of like strutting around in thigh highs, making making dudes' eyes bulge. Not that seductive, but just in the sense of, hey, I like looking at this thing. We should keep it alive for a while. Here's an example. If people saw a 5-year-old on the streets rolling around in a pile of its own shit, they'd be like, ugh, what a scumbag. But if an infant did it, people would still be like, oh man, little guy, I want to take you home, clean you up, put you in little hats. Yeah, it has to do with a baby's facial features, like their large forehead and eyes, which set off a bunch of baby caring instincts in our brains, causing us to perceive cuteness. It's only when they hit like 2 or 3 when that all goes down the shitter. Lastly, babies have a surprisingly good concept of morality. According to a study by Yale University's Infant Cognition Center, babies are born with an innate sense of right and wrong. Here's how the study went, right? So first they put on a puppet show for the baby with these 2 rabbit dolls, and they made one of them act nice and the other one act like a dick. Then at the end of the show, the babies were offered either puppet, and in almost every case, the babies took the nice one. And you might say a strong grip on morality doesn't qualify as a superpower. Personally, I disagree. People are terrible at keeping their basic sense of right and wrong unless their society maintains it for them. Let me give an example. A few days ago in the Philippines, the president of the entire country basically said, hey, we should just start murdering every drug addict alive. Right now. And this isn't seen as insane over there. No, millions of Filipinos are now on board with this. It is fucked. You see, babies lack the mental capacity to justify atrocities with shit like it's about the greater good, you know. They have no prejudice. They just see people as people. And honestly, I think we could all learn a thing or two from that. Not to get all George Carlin-y on you guys or anything. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Hey kids, from clubbing seals to inventing new compound nouns for snow, nobody knows how to kick it quite like the Inuit. Of course, if you're a close-minded tree dweller like me, you might initially think that they can't be that good at storytelling, given that they only know about like 6 things. But that's not true. They've actually got an incredibly complex and fascinating oral tradition. You could ask one about it, there's plenty of these guys around today, but they've got Jesus and microwaves and shit, and that's boring. We want to talk about the stuff from before missionaries came and sent their miserable way of life to a farm upstate. So instead, let a 20-year-old college kid who's never lived outside of Delaware tell you all about it. Obvious disclaimer, Inuits are super diverse. Calling a caribou Inuit a copper Inuit is like calling a copper caribou a caribou caribou. Sure, they both look the same from far away, but when a thunderstorm hits, you better know which one to hide under. As such, while most of the following can be applied in broad terms to most Inuits, the little details come from a variety of subcultures that don't necessarily represent the whole. Got it? Swank. Now, a lot of the world's faiths are centered around bringing people together and inspiring them with stories and images of the divine, so as to give them a wider sense of purpose here on Earth. That's all well and good, but that whole search for greater meaning thing only really comes into play once your original purpose of making sure you don't die is pretty much figured out. Not so for the Inuit. You see, it ain't so easy living in a place where plants can't grow and being naked for an hour means certain death. As such, their beliefs were a little more practical, being more so geared towards fostering the paranoid levels of fear required to survive in such a hostile environment. For example, the Inuit believed that everyone has a sort of life force or soul, what they called a nirnik, and like plenty of religions, they believed it lived on after death and could meddle in the world of mortals. But while most cultures regard animals as being spiritually inferior meat puppets, to the Inuits, a creature's soul is just as powerful and vengeful as that of a person. And like I said, up there in the Arctic, not much greenery in the scenery, so they basically had no choice but to devour nothing but souls every single day. And wouldn't you know it, souls don't much care for getting ate. So the Inuit made sure to follow a complex set of guidelines on how to placate their prey in the afterlife, lest the pissed off ghost of that Arctic tern whispers sweet nothings into a polar bear's ears and turns your whole village into a big Japanese flag by sunrise. Here's a few. If you kill something, make sure you eat it all. Just as an American who doesn't clean his plate doesn't get dessert, an Inuit who doesn't eat all his walrus doesn't get any more walrus. Ever. till they starve. If you kill a polar bear, make sure to point its head towards the direction it came from so it can find its way home more easily. If you pull a seal out of the water, give him some fresh water so he's not thirsty when you bash his brain in. Also, its spirit lives in its bladder, so make sure to hold on to it until the yearly bladder festival, where everyone gets together, blows up their bladders like balloons, and throws them out to sea so they can reincarnate into new seals. These taboos aren't all just about hunting though. For some reason there's a load of them about pregnancy. Don't make fun of people's facial features or else the baby will have the same features. Don't walk backwards or else the baby will come out backwards, dangerous. Face your bed towards a doorway or it'll come out sideways, also dangerous. Don't wrap rope around your hand or it'll come out with the umbilical cord around its neck, extremely dangerous. Don't drink directly from a soup bowl or it'll come out with dark skin, not touching that one. Don't put a bowl on your head or else it'll be wearing the placenta like a hat, too hilarious, and the list goes on. Central to the consequences of breaking a lot of these rules is the being known as Sedna. The story behind Sedna varies pretty wildly between different groups of Inuits, but here's the gist of it. She was once a young girl who pissed everyone off, either by being annoying or eating too much food or rejecting an arranged marriage or marrying a dog for some reason. So her father throws her out of a kayak, and when she tries to get back in, he chops off all her fingers. The sea goddess sees this, furrows her long floppy seaweed brow, does a sassy snap, and the girl turns into an immortal sea witch, while her disembodied fingers turn into the first seals. And to this day, Sedna sits at the bottom of the ocean, growing new fingers which promptly fall off and turn into all the world's seal lions and narwhalruses. That is until someone goofs up in some small arbitrary fashion like, "Yo Sedna, bad news, I just caught a guy chewing a piece of blubber. What's wrong with that?" Well, he wasn't looking north while he did it. Are you fucking kidding me? In his defense, he was standing right on the pole, so he literally couldn't look anywhere but south. He could have moved! That's it! No more fingy foods for 3 moons! Another fun creation myth is how the moon and sun came to be. So long ago, there were these 2 siblings named Melina and Aningen. The 2 got along just fine as kids, but as the 2 got older, they were put into their respective genders' living areas and saw each other less and less. Then one day, Aningen got the feeling that his lower nose was in dire need of some Eskimo kisses. So that night, he snuck into the women's lodge, saw his sister, thought, I pick that one, and proceeded to do, unspeakable things, technically becoming his own Eskimo brother. But it was too dark at the time for Melina to tell what happened. The next night, Ningen's like, "I'll fucking do it again." Only this time, Melina smears soot all over his face. So later, she goes over to the men's lodges, and who has crap all over his face but her brother? This makes her so mad that she cuts off her own breasts with a knife, puts them in a bowl, throws them at Ningen, and says, "If you enjoy me so much, then here, eat 'em. Go ahead, eat my disembodied, quivering titties." She runs off into the night with a torch, and Ningen is really remorseful or horny or something, so he chases after her with his own torch, and they end up running so fast that they took off like a plane into the sky, and Melina became the sun while Ningen became the moon. Excuse me, Mrs. Elder, if the sun and moon didn't exist yet, how did he do that stuff at night when there was no night? Now, some details of the story are tied into real-world phenomena. Some say that Ningen tripped and messed up his torch, which is why the moon is so dim. And the moon cycles are because he gets really skinny from chasing after her for so long. And the new moon is when he goes away for a few days to hunt seals so he can fatten back up. But here's the kicker. Nobody ever explains what the whole lopping off her tits part was supposed to represent. That's entirely just creative liberty. Just like, yes, that's why the sun doesn't have tits. Probably for the best it doesn't, otherwise half the population will be blind by now, and worse, it's the half that makes up 85% of my viewer base. So you know what? Thanks for slicing and dicing them tea towels, Melina. I kinda owe you my career. But as for you, your eyes are valuable. You should treat them to something more substantial and informative. Like, say, a library of high-quality exclusive documentaries. Sponsor time. CuriosityStream was founded by the dude behind the Discovery Channel, and it's great for someone like me who horks down any useless knowledge he sees, like the brave gators keeping America's sewers free of rats. And with thousands of titles, a lot of which are CuriosityStream exclusives, it's hard not to find something that interests you. Here's a gem I watched recently. The Kingdom, How Fungi Made Our World. Mushrooms are honestly like if you told aliens about Earth and they tried their best to recreate what they thought plants were. Real wild stuff. You can try CuriosityStream for absolutely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/salmonella and use promo code salmonella during the sign up process. Also, signing up for a year of CuriosityStream will now give you Nebula for free. What's Nebula? Glad I asked. A bunch of independent creators that I may or may not associate with in some way decided decided to start their own streaming service, completely free of ads and full of content that can't be seen anywhere else. I hardly make content for my own channel, so God knows I couldn't muster up any Nebula exclusives, but here's some guys who have. If you like them, go check it out. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and...
Hey kids, let me tell you about Swiss Miss Instant Hot Chocolate and why their packaging is bullshit. So it comes in a box shaped like this, right? And within the box there are individual bags of hot chocolate arranged like this. Already you can see some of this company's incompetence shining through. There is no reason for their box to be double wide. It is a waste of cardboard. Let me prove it. Here's a top-down view, right? Let's say this side is 8 inches, this side is 2 inches. That adds up to 20 inches of cardboard. If you doubled it up like this, just had the package a single file, that's only 16 inches. It's a waste. And if that weren't bad enough, for some reason they decide to attach the bags with these tiny paper bridges. So when you go to make your packet of hot chocolate, you have to detach the two bags. That doesn't sound so bad, except for the fact that it's impossible to break them cleanly. Every goddamn time, they tear holes into the sides of the bags. And it's never just one bag either. That would be too simple. It puts holes in both. So either way, you're gonna have to put one back and just live with it leaking powder in the box. It's gotten to the point where I have to employ surgical precision just to avoid getting chocolate dust all over my frickin' house. It would be so simple to avoid too. Even if you really had to have these pointless attachment things, you could at least put little perforations down the center so they break down the middle. School notebooks have been doing it since the 50s, so why, in 2016, has Swiss Miss not discovered the arcane technology of dotted lines? So there's powder everywhere. The cat's looking at you funny because it knows you're pissed off, but at least it's time to enjoy some hot chocolate. You pour your bag into the mug, pour in the hot water, take a sip, and it tastes like piss. Swiss Miss Instant Piss. So you go back to check the box, thinking maybe you did something wrong. The cat starts shaking because it knows what's coming, and that's when you see it. Serving size, 6 ounces. So finally the dam breaks, you unleash a primal roar of sheer fury. The cat shits itself and jumps out the window as you punt kick the Swiss Miss box across the room. The average mug is 12 fluid ounces in volume. Who in God's name only drinks 6 ounces of liquid? So finally, you reach into the box and pull out the desecrated corpse of that other bag from earlier, and you pour it in. Only then can you enjoy your subpar hot beverage properly. This whole system, right? This charade that Swiss Miss puts you through. It's kinda like telling a guy to just jizz with one ball instead of both of them. They're in the same container, and separating them would be difficult. And even if I were to figure out how to do that, 2 does the job better than 1 anyway, so it's pointless. Nowadays, I just fold the packet in half and rip along the seams of both. And maybe that was their intention, but if so, why would you give me the illusion of separability in the first place? It's like Siamese twins. They're joined for no reason and hard as fuck to separate, so I guess I'm just gonna have to live with both. I don't know which is worse, the fact this minor inconvenience was my biggest dilemma all day, or that this inconvenience even exists in the first place. But anyway, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Hey kids, today I'm going to talk about some of the strangest rules, regulations, and ordinances from around the globe. Our first one comes from the United Kingdom. In 1986, Parliament passed what is known as the Salmon Act, which, among other things, made it illegal to handle salmon in suspicious circumstance, whatever that means. Oh shit. Police! Is that fucking fish Jenga? No! Here's another. In many Caribbean countries, it's illegal for a civilian to wear camouflage clothing in public. In other words, you're only allowed to wear really good camouflage. The USA has its fair share of dumb laws, most of which exist on the state level. For example, in Oklahoma, you can be arrested for making an ugly face at a dog. Knowing the average panhandler, it's fortunate that this law doesn't get enforced much, or else half the state would have to brown bag it just by default. And we can check this off. Looking good.
Moving on, in the state of Florida, and I don't really know why they'd have to enforce this one, it's considered unlawful to have sex with a porcupine. Police! Hey, guys, it's cool. I'm actually a hedgehog. Oh. Carry on. Another good Florida law, this one really cakes the cake. It's illegal for an unmarried female to go skydiving on Sunday. This is how I imagine that law coming into being, right? We need to ban skydiving. Why is that? The sky is God's domain. Us mortals have no right playing in it. I'm pretty sure God doesn't care about people jumping out of planes for fun. Okay, but how about we just ban people God doesn't like from skydiving, like unwed women? That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. What if it's also the Lord's Day? Okay, that's fair. This next one comes from Russia, where homophobia is fairly commonplace. As one can imagine, gay marriage is a big no-no over there. But in 2013, Vladimir Putin took things a step further and made it illegal to even tell children that gay people exist.
Bolshevik привет, бабушка. Balaklava Sovietko sa Kremlin bojar Gulag Rasputin Rubel Anestesia Tetris Borscht Red October. Dostoevsky. Stalingrad Kalishnikov Vodka Adidas Track Pant. Suka blyat.
Apparently though, that's not the weirdest rule to come out of a former red state. In China, it's actually illegal to reincarnate without the government's permission. Like a lot of Chinese policies, this law was mostly just put in place to piss off Tibet. Still though, I can see there being a lot of unforeseen consequences here. Come in. Sir, we found this cat in one of the local temples. We suspect it might have been a Buddhist in a past life. Huh. Better execute it just to be safe. By your orders, Captain. Mao. Wait a minute, did you hear that? Mao. There it is again. He said Mao. Oh my god. That must be Chairman Mao reincarnated. Sorry, sir, but the orders have already been given. No! Jesus Christ, you just killed our glorious leader. Oh god, you're right. What have I done? Come in. Sir, we found another cat. Meow. Holy shit, that was fast. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Also, I have a Twitter now, check the description.
Hey kids, it's Food Friday. So today, I'm going to cover some of the deadly toxins found in your local produce section. Our first item is rhubarb. Now, the part of the rhubarb that you normally eat, the delicious red stalk, is virtually toxin-free, so no worries there. It's the greenery of the plant that's a cause for concern. The leaves of the rhubarb plant contain small amounts of oxalic acid, which is toxic to humans. And it's not a fun poison either, not one of those drift off to dreamland types. It will mess your day up, particularly in the digestive and renal areas. Some symptoms include breathing difficulty, burning of the mouth and throat, eye pain, bloody urine, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, convulsions, coma, and only then will you finally receive the sweet release of death. Of course, you'd need like a shitload of leaves to actually reach the lethality point, about 11 pounds for a 150-pound person. To put that into perspective, the average person eats around 4 pounds of food a day total, so to eat that weight of anything would be very difficult. Next up are almonds. So you know how they say cyanide reeks of almonds? Turns out it's actually the other way around. Sweet almonds, the type people normally eat, contain a bit of the toxin, just enough to get a whiff. After eating about a pound of them, you may experience some of the more mild symptoms, which, while they're not exactly fun, aren't quite as bad as oxalic acid. In order for the poison to actually be deadly, you would have to eat around 4 pounds of almonds in the course of a couple hours. Considering that's the total food intake daily for an average person, and that you would be vomiting, cramping, and hyperventilating the whole time, it'd be hard to pull off. Next are apple seeds. Most of you are probably familiar with this one. Apple seeds contain cyanogenic glycosides, which are materials that produce cyanide once they enter the digestive system. These chemicals also have a significant presence in a whole menagerie of other produce items, but out of all of these, apple seeds will give you the most bang for your buck as far as potency goes. You would only need around 3.5 ounces of the seeds to do yourself in, which is a lot easier to pull off than the last two. Of course, the whole point of seeds in fruit is so that things will eat them and crap them out elsewhere to spread the plant around, which would be pretty hard to do if the thing carrying your babies keels over and dies. For this reason, the glycosides are only accessible when one crushes the seeds open. Whole seeds are relatively safe. But if you really wanted to off yourself, you could toss 18 apple cores in a blender and drink the whole thing. The most virulent thing you'll find in your entire produce section, however, is none other than the kidney bean. Yes, this innocent-looking legume holds some sinister secrets. Kidney beans contain a toxin known as phytohemagglutinin, and as little as 4 raw beans worth is enough to trigger symptoms. The main sign of kidney bean poisoning is known scientifically as two-tip tummy terrorism. Boiling the beans deactivates the toxin, which is why we can eat them normally, but heating the beans below the boiling point, as in a slow cooker, actually increases the toxin's potency, to the point where a single heated bean is enough to get you blasting out of both ends. I couldn't actually find any reports on deaths caused by the toxin, probably because everyone who ingests it ends up propelling it away from them at high velocities a few hours later. But it'll certainly make you want to die at least. There are a bunch of other minor sources of poison present in your produce section, of course. I just decided to highlight a few. Anyway, I'm Sam Nella, and thank you for watching.
Hey kids, whenever I browse this site, I see more and more videos of people talking about things like YouTuber drama, the election, world politics, and it made me think, hey, maybe I should start covering more relevant, nuanced topics in my videos. Anyway, let's talk about chickens. So the story of the chicken begins a long time ago in Southeast Asia. Now, this area had a ton of bamboo growing all over the place. And the thing about bamboo is it follows a very specific life cycle, where once every 50 years or so, every bamboo plant in a given region will blossom at the exact same time. Then, shortly after, they litter the whole area with these little seeds known as bamboo rice, or as I call them, bambinos. These pellets get planted, the current bamboo dies out, and the cycle starts over. Now, enter the ancestor of the domesticated chicken, known as the red jungle fowl. The jungle fowl lived in the same area as the bamboo, and, as you can imagine, they got a lot of benefit out of being literally knee-deep in food once every half-century. So much so that evolution basically said, alright, when food supplies go up, I want you to just start pumping out babies like there's no tomorrow. That way, we can take as much advantage of each bloom as possible. As a result, the chicken population became synchronized with the bamboo, shooting up during blooms and dwindling in between. Then humans showed up and they saw this pattern, and they said, wow, how bamboozling. And then they realized, wait a minute, that pun was dumb. But also, we can harness this whole chicken cycle thing. All we have to do is give these guys a whole bunch of food, and we can make their reproductive systems go into overdrive whenever we want. Do you know what that means? Lots of hot bird porn. No, it means we get as many eggs as we could ever dream of. So, with a bit of work, we managed to domesticate the chicken around 5000 BC. And as you can imagine, the idea of having a literal egg-laying machine around the house was extremely popular, leading to the chicken spreading across the entirety of the civilized world over the course of a few millennia. I think it's interesting that, despite the fact that the West has had chickens for most of its history, it wasn't until way later that we figured out where they came from. Like, alright men, it's time to delve into the world of the unknown. We're gonna see things the likes of which man has never laid eyes upon before. But, if you keep your wits about you, we just might make it out of here alive. Hey, is this yours? No? Weird. What the hell? Of course, having a constantly supercharged uterus is not without its drawbacks. After all, the chicken essentially goes through its entire menstrual cycle every day. So next time your girlfriend's complaining about how bad her period is, get her a box of chocolates and be generally attentive to her needs. You prick. Anyway, one thing with chickens and most other egg-laying critters is that they only have one hole in their pelvic region, which is called a cloaca, I think. Or cloaca. Cloaca? So the Croatia basically acts like a funnel, taking all the eggs and waste and sending it down the same chute. And while this might sound convenient at first, there is one fatal disadvantage that affects chickens in particular. Sometimes the egg can get stuck on its way out, leading to a condition known as egg binding. And since this means nothing can exit the clamato anymore, the egg-bound chicken ends up dying of constipation over the course of a couple days. Hey Jerry, how you doing? Not good, Sean. Not good. Oh man, what's wrong? It's just, ever since Jenny got egg-bound, things have been so stressful. Her funeral expenses are through the roof, and her memory means so much to me, but If the bills keep coming in like this, I'm not sure my family will be able to handle it. Well, hey man, you know what they say, don't put all your eggs in one casket. Let's just hope she doesn't get egg-zoomed. I'm sorry. Don't ever contact me or my kids ever again. I understand. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Hey Majors, so I'd like to start off with a little biology lesson. When a species finds itself living on an island, it can start to evolve in strange ways based on the different pressures applied by the new environment. This is called island syndrome, and while it can manifest in a lot of ways, the biggest driving force is often a lack of predators. For example, the dodo lost its ability to fly since there was nothing to flee from. The Saint Kilda field mouse got twice as big since it no longer had to hide. And with no one around to bully them, the Sardinians started putting maggots in their cheese. Meet kazumartsu, literal translation, rotten cheese. It's made by taking a perfectly good wheel of pecorino and letting a special type of fly lay eggs in it. The fly babies then work to partially digest the cheese, rendering it goopy and wet and maybe quite tasty and worm-filled. Now, cheese as a concept is already quite suspect. It's clotted milk that you fill with bacteria and mold and let sit for a while. But cheese is safe and delicious. Cheese is my friend. I trust cheese. So my guard would be down around kazumartsu. I've learned to look past a cheese's childhood. Strange upbringings are what give them their character. But it turns out, those maggots are still alive, and if you don't chew well enough, they can cause enteric myiasis, which is a fancy term for fly larvae living in your intestines. Symptoms are similar to food poisoning, except with the added psychic pain of knowing that, again, your bowels are full of squiggly new friends. It's for this reason that kazumartsu is banned in the EU and elsewhere. A black market still exists, which is wild, and it's not a small one. In 2019, the illicit kazumartsu trade was estimated to be worth 2 to 3 million euros annually. Personally, I would just do it prohibition style, like definitely don't put these fly eggs on this sumptuous wheel of pecorino. But if you do, you absolutely shouldn't keep it warm and damp for a week. But although it's traditional to leave the larvae alive when you eat your mag and cheese, some consumers still prefer them dead, shockingly. In that case, one puts the cheese in a sealed bag, and when the maggots run out of oxygen, they writhe around and fling themselves all over the place. This is heard as a distinct pitter-patter against the walls of the bag, and when the sound stops, the contents are ready to eat, like popcorn. Shark fin soup is one most of us have heard about already, mostly in reference to its effect on shark populations and the wastefulness that goes into making it. Until recently though, I never looked into the nature of the dish itself. I figured, right, the fins are just the only part of the shark worth eating. Big whoop, it's probably not much different from like swordfish. Apparently though, I had it backwards. Shark fins aren't even meat. They're made almost entirely of cartilage and collagen. They are the last part we should be eating. That's why it's only made into soup, because without being soaked in broth, it has zero flavor or nutritional value on its own. Their only redeeming quality is their unique mouthfeel due to how stringily the collagen grows, in structures called ceratotrichia. The texture has been described as somewhere between chewy and crunchy, which I find describes most things, actually. Other adjectives present on Wikipedia include snappy, gelatinous, and sinewy. The exact sensation of eating this substance remains a mystery to me, and the unintended side effect of all this research is that I now really want to try it. Like, it's a big trade. I've got to be the one that's wrong. There is imitation shark fin soup available, but I've already decided that it's not nearly as good, so I've come up with a compromise to this controversy. Everyone on Earth gets just one bite. Say there's 10 bites to a fin, 4 fins to a shark, 200 million sharks die, sure, a necessary casualty, but then we can end the practice forever. All done. You can finally rest, Mr. Ming. Come here, baby. Aww. Aki. What? Aki. Where? Aki. The aki is a fruit originally from West Africa, which is most commonly associated with Jamaican cuisine, where it appears in such dishes as aki and saltfish. These alien kidneys here are called the arils, and they're the only part of the fruit that's actually eaten. The flavor is on the savory side, being described as kinda nutty or bean-like. What makes the aki controversial, though, is the effects it can cause when prepared improperly. If the arils are allowed to completely ripen, they're harmless, but if you eat them too early, or don't thoroughly clean off all the non-aril stuff, they can cause Jamaican vomiting sickness. This disease doesn't sound real, it sounds like it belongs next to Eastern sweats and Tangerian bone grindings, but that's actually an official term, and as for symptoms, it does what it says on the tin. plus maybe death. While ackee-based products aren't outright illegal in the United States, they are very tightly regulated, and the raw fruit itself cannot be imported. So if you're American and want to try it, your options are fully cooked canned ackee or going to Florida where a few people grow it domestically. Next we have bird's nest soup. This is another one that I've vaguely heard of, and for years I just assumed the name was a playful metaphor like ants on a log or shit on a shingle. Turns out, nope, this dish contains an actual bird nest, not like a pile of twigs like I was picturing, but rather a specific type of nest only made by certain species of swiftlets. These nests are mostly made out of mucins, which are a set of proteins that, among other things, serve to thicken all those wonderful secretions our bodies make. There's a little bit in human saliva, a little bit more in mucus, and in swiftlet saliva, look out pal. So all the swiftlet does is it finds a nice wall, starts laying out fat strings of slobber, which dry, and eventually she's got a nice place to roost. That is, right up until some gourmand says,
Today I crave bird spit. You can keep the eggs though.
And they then reconstitute it back into its original gelatinous texture. Unfortunately, these nests can't enter the US since, believe it or not, eating bird saliva is a great way to catch bird flu. And now the time has come to speak of the ortolan. The ortolan is a kind of bunting, which is a sort of passerine, which is a type of bird. They're birds. Like many animals, they have a long history of being eaten by the French, but what separates the ortolan from your average squab or pheasant is the unique way in which it is prepared and eaten. They're typically caught with nets and kept in the dark, which causes them to overeat for some reason. Once it's about twice as fat, the entire bird is then thrown into a container of brandy, alive, and sealed in. While this serves to marinate the creature, it also drowns in the process, thereby killing one bird with no stones. The ortolan is then roasted, plucked, and presented whole to the consumer, who inserts the carcass into their mouth feet first. As they chew, one hand continues holding the bird's head, while the other picks out the larger bones. This whole ritual is usually performed with a towel or large napkin over one's head. There's a few explanations for the purpose of the towel. Some say it's just there to keep the aromas in, while others say it's there to, quote, shield from God's eyes the shame of such a decadent and disgraceful act. Yeah, this one I'm okay with not trying, actually. Notable fans of this dish include, not joking, Bill Cosby and the guy who invented the lobotomy. To be part of that social club. Our mission is to eat birds whole and then make people not remember things. Killing ortolans was banned across the EU in 2007, not for any ethical reason, but because French people did this so much that the entire ortolan population was threatened. Thankfully, as of 2018, their conservation status is under least concern, so hopefully the French can get back to it soon. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Hey kids, it's Food Friday, so today's lesson is on the history of sushi. Sushi first came into existence in Japan around the 8th century. It consisted of gutted, salted fish stored in fermented rice. You know, this half-rotting rice is good and all, but I can still smell things. Yeah, and I'm not having nearly as much diarrhea as I would like to be. What should we do? Raw fish. Raw fish, I was thinking exactly the same thing. God, we are so in sync. Nah, but actually, the rice wasn't meant to be eaten. It was only used as a means of preservation. You see, the fermenty juices of the rice would soak into the fish and prevent it from spoiling. However, as semi-rancid food often does, it would also impart a sour taste on the fish. That's where the name sushi comes from, an antiquated Japanese term for sour tasting. Also, it smelled like death. The odor is described as an extremely pungent cross between blue cheese, fish, and vinegar. Man, I'm mad. Why's that? I smelled something down the road. Thought a new sushi vendor was in town. Turns out it was just a hobo taking a piss on a tuna sandwich. Later on, during the late Edo period, people started pickling the rice, which drastically shortened the required fermentation time. So now, rather than smelling like blue cheese, fish, and vinegar, it just smelled like fish and vinegar. Go figure. People found this rice to be much more palatable, so it began to be eaten alongside the fish. Sheet seaweed was also invented around 1750, which allowed the contemporary sushi roll to take form around this time. Toss in a couple vegetables, and you've got something much more resemblant to today's sushi. During the late 19th century, many Japanese emigrated to America to escape the imperial takeover of Japan, which was known as the Meiji Restoration. It just so happens that they brought the concept of sushi with them, which enjoyed brief popularity among the upper class during the turn of the 20th century. However, coinciding with the imperial takeover was the fact that Japan started being kind of a dick. Hey, Freedom is gay. What did you just say? Yeah, your way of life is for pussies. Oh yeah? Guess we'll just stop eating your dumb fucking fish roll things then. Hey, fuck you, you cheeseburger slut. I'll nuke your bitch ass. Wait, what is nuke? 40 years, you'll see. And thus, sushi lost its place in the West. Cut to the early 1960s. World War II tensions are mostly gone, and refrigeration is everywhere. This allowed sushi to again rise in America, this time for good. By the 1980s, sushi restaurants were everywhere, especially along the West Coast. But as you can imagine, American sushi saw significant alteration in order to appeal more to the Western palate. For example, if you went to Japan and asked for cream cheese in your roll, they'd probably just put you on a raft and gently push you out to sea. But to each their own, and today sushi is more popular than ever. So kids, remember to be careful of who you make fun of, because the weird smelly kid of today might just be the next big thing tomorrow. Hey kids, today I'm going to talk about the different kinds of straws. So first you got straw. This was the first kind of straw to be used by humans. Many of this straw is still called straw because it was discovered before plural nouns were invented. Good for roofing, good for feeding livestock, and it can also be used to make straw men, which are good for holding back society. Straw rating, 6 out of 10. Then there's classic straws, a beverage conduit incredibly simple in form, yet highly effective in function. In fact, these devices have caused me to create a new philosophical principle. I call it Nella's straw. It's totally identical in every way to Occam's razor, except for the fact that it only applies to straws. Anyway, straw rating, 10 out of 10. Next on the food chain are bendy straws. These are proof that just bending something a little can make it that much better. Bend a breadstick, you got a pretzel. Bend a sword, you got a scimitar. Bend the rules, you got a badass. Bend the truth, you got a nomination. Bend a straw, and you've got, a slightly more convenient straw. Straw rating, bendy 10 out of 10. Next is the last straw. I don't really know what it looks like. All I know is that it makes girls never talk to me again. Straw rating, cry wank out of 10. Then you got crazy straws. In the words of Dr. Ian Malcolm, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, that they didn't stop to think if they should. This quote is frequently misattributed to having been talking about bringing dinosaurs back to life, when in reality he was talking about the invention of the crazy straw. The crazy straw is a perfect example of humanity's tendency to overdo things just to get our sick kicks. When my gaze falls upon a small child across the room at Olive Garden, gently sipping chocolate milk through a crazy straw, all I see is a misguided youth wasting his life. Straw rating, 9 out of 10. So after all this, I figured, hey, if we already got the crazy straw, we might as well double down here. So I invented something that goes beyond just crazy. I call it the menace to society straw. Patent pending. Straw rating, fuck you, God is dead. Out of 10. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
This video is sponsored by Wix. Hey kids, let me ask you, do you watch the news often? Have you attended a school in your life? You ever look at $1? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then chances are you're familiar with at least a couple United States presidents. But if you're like me prior to last week, you've probably never heard of a United States emperor. Excuse me, good sir, but I should inform you that we're actually living under an emperor as we speak, at least according to my degree from the University of Reddit. Hey, that's great. Whoa, look over there. It's someone criticizing Elon Musk. And he's making typos. Anyway, let me tell y'all a story about a man named Joshua Norton. Norton was born in England at some point in the 1810s. Very little is known about the guy's younger years other than the fact that he spent most of his youth in South Africa as part of the UK's colonization programs. He came to San Francisco in 1849 with a modest amount of wealth to his name, and worked his way up in the real estate and commodities markets to become one of the city's wealthiest citizens. All was normal in the life of Mr. Norton, until one day when he got a little too big for his britches. You see, in 1852, China was facing a huge famine, so they completely banned the export of rice. Naturally, San Fran's rice price began to skyrocket in response to the reduced supply, peaking at 36 cents per pound. Norton saw this and decided to buy a $25,000 rice shipment from Peru at 12 cents per pound, thinking he'd corner the market. Keep in mind, that's around $750,000 in today's money. Little did he know, that wasn't the only shipment coming out of Peru, and by the time he was able to sell it, rice was already back down to 3 cents a pound. Now, according to my calculations, that put Norton at a net loss of a whole frickin' lot. He subsequently got into a years-long court battle with the vendor who sold him the shipment, which only cost him more money, and ultimately left the man destitute. So, Norton did what anybody would do after losing everything. He drank a nice hefty dose of fuck it all and said, you know what? The courts can eat my shorts, the house can eat my blouse, Peru can eat my shoe. I declare myself emperor of these United States, and I'm telling every newspaper in the city about it. And then he did. Now, the papers could have just been like, what a lunatic, and that would have been the end of it. But instead they said, you know what, this guy's kind of a meme. Let's publish his declaration, just for gits and shiggles. People across the city had their laughs, and Norton's rise to power began. From here, he issued several more commands to the media, and unlike nowadays, people loved having regular Norton updates shoved in their face. Among these announcements was a decree in 1859 to formally abolish the United States Congress. He also gave out a mandate to both the Protestant and Roman Catholic churches to formally ordain him as emperor. Although these edicts were ultimately ignored by the powers they were addressed to, they still served to build Norton's reputation around the city, and before long he was a fully fledged local celebrity. He was easily recognized by passerby, typically sporting a blue naval uniform and a beaver hat with a peacock feather in it. Pretty soon, Norton could expect to receive the royal treatment wherever he went. People started to address him formally on the streets, he got to ride public transport for free, and he even got occasional tax payments from people sympathetic to his impoverished living situation. Oh, and get this, Norton became so famous that toy stores in the city began selling dolls of the man for kids to play with. How many people can you think of that were so legendary that they got dolls made after them? You got Emperor Norton, Mr. T, and the bear that Teddy Roosevelt decided not to shoot. That's it, really. Also, though not backed by actual law in any way, his declarations came to be taken relatively seriously by the populace around him. For example, according to Norton, saying Frisco instead of San Francisco would be punishable by a $25 fine. Talk to any Frisco native and you'll find that this attitude survives to this day. With the help of a local printing firm, Norton even issued his own currency, which was actually accepted by many residents of the city, despite having no backing behind it whatsoever. In fact, a few Norton bucks are still floating around today as highly valued collector's items. I tried doing the same thing a while back, but unfortunately, Onella rubles are still only worth their weight in Onella rubles. Of course, it wasn't all magpies and molasses for our good friend Josh. He was once arrested by a policeman named Armand Barbier, who wanted to throw him in an asylum for his apparent insanity. Needless to say, when the public caught wind of this, they lost their fucking minds. Irate citizens wrote complaints in droves. All the newspapers published scathing editorials towards the police department. Stray cats were thrown into wood chippers. I don't have any evidence for that last one. I'm just, assuming based on what I would do in this scenario. Anyway, pretty soon, the chief of police got the memo, and Emperor Norton was released unscathed. Thankfully, Norton issued a royal pardon towards the man who arrested him, and from that point onward, whenever Norton passed a member of the force, they would stop and salute him. So, although in many ways he appeared godlike, Norton was but a mortal. And, as mortals sometimes do, Emperor Norton decided to drop dead on a street corner on January 8th of 1880. However, he left behind a legacy the likes of which most of us could only dream of. Beyond just the comedic value of his many exploits, Norton definitely had his prophetic moments, with some of his orders actually coming true decades after they were given. On multiple occasions, he ordered a bridge to be built between San Francisco and the Oakland Bay Area
area, which was eventually constructed in the 1930s. He also told people to form a League of Nations to uphold international interests. Unfortunately, a man yelling in California wasn't quite enough to convince the leaders of the world that such a thing was necessary. But who knows? Maybe little Nordo could have stopped World War I if he had been just a bit louder. I hope this tale has inspired some of you young impressionable kids out there, not because I expect any of you to succeed in the same way Norton did, but just because it's my personal belief that the world could always use more oddball vagrants. Wait a minute. Oddball vagrants. Product placement. Sponsor time. Question. Do you do literally anything? If the answer is yes, then chances are you could get a lot of use out of a website powered by Wix. You can give your small business the professional makeover it deserves, or show off your art and other hobbies in any style or layout you can imagine. Even if you don't do anything with your life, then hey, today's as good a day as any to try your hand at web development. Wix does all the heavy lifting for you, meaning even a novice can create stunning pages of all shapes and sizes. Beyond just the aesthetic aspect, Wix also offers tons of other services for your site, like custom domain names and email services. Oh, and did I mention it's free? So please, try Wix today. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.
Hey kids, it's That Happened Thursday. So today I'll discuss where different religious symbols come from. First up is Christianity. As most of you know, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified despite being supposedly sinless, so the cross is representative of his martyrdom. Personally, I always thought choosing the cross of all things to signify the whole religion was at least a little silly. Right, my prophet? He was a great dude, spread peace and love all along the land, performed many bountiful miracles, and then right at the end, he fell face first into a fucking bear trap and died. So that's our symbol, whole religion bear trap. Peace, love, compassion, and bear trap. Next up is the Jewish Star of David. It's been used now and then since the 11th century, but it only really got popular around the 1800s. There's no real special meaning behind it. They really just took a random symbol that was kind of around, called the hexagram, and made it their own. Bro, check out my new religious symbol. I'm pretty sure you didn't come up with that. Pretty sure that's a thing elementary schoolers do in their notebook when they're bored. Nah man, not once it gets popular. Then everybody will think of my religion when they see it. Whatever floats your boat. Jimmy, what is this in your notebook? Oh, it's just a little doodle. Jimmy, listen to me. We are Catholics. Now get over here and erase this blasphemy. But Mom, Now! Next is Islam. So, the star and crescent actually used to represent the Ottoman Empire, which ruled over most of the Islamic world during the 1800s. However, the empire dissolved after World War I, and its symbol was later adopted to represent Islam as a whole around the 1970s. Hey Rob, guess what? I'm starting a new baseball team. Isn't that the Chicago Cubs logo? Oh please, they're barely even a team. When's the last time they did anything? Nobody's using this symbol because nobody wants to buy their merchandise. Perfectly good logo. I'm taking it for my team. Couldn't that lead to a bit of confusion? Only because they'll see a guy in a Cubs jersey who can actually catch a pop fly. Next up is Taoism. Alright, so the yin-yang, or as they call it, the Taijitu, actually applies to a lot of Asian religions. Just the Taoists use it as their primary symbol today. It originated in China, dating back to the 11th century AD. Although it's had a lot of different looks over the years, it's always represented the same idea of balance between contrasting forces in the world. Okay, Carl, balance of good and evil. Let's see your design. Not bad, not bad. Alright, what about you, Steve? What the hell is that? Oh, well, you said balance between good and bad in the world, so I drew a grilled cheese sandwich shaking hands with a razor blade covered dildo. What? Okay, all other questions aside, why is a grilled cheese the best thing you could think of? Have you ever had a grilled cheese? Like a real one with butter just smeared all over it, crust nice and crispy, sprinkle some onions in there, get out. Okay. So you know how when people are meditating in movies, they do that obnoxious Om thing? Well, apparently, Om is actually the name of the popular Hindu symbol, and repeating its name aloud is said to be a sacred incantation, which is why it's said during things like rituals or yoga. The actual meaning behind the symbol is said to represent a load of different things depending on who you ask or when. Basically, whatever your purpose is, it's a one-size-fits-all prayer. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty. This is taking forever. No, you know what? I'm gonna make my own religion, yeah. And our prayers, one syllable long. We're just gonna go ood whenever we feel like praying. That's it. Dinner table, ood! But how will you get any meaning out of that? It's my own word. I can give it whatever meaning I want. So I'll just give it all the meanings. It'll mean the soul. It'll mean the universe. It'll mean I don't have to recite any more long-winded bullshit. Anyway, pass the corn. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. At some point I'll do a second video covering some of the more obscure religious symbols. But until tomorrow, I'm Sam and Nella, and thank you for watching.